I just want to warn you now, before I start this story, if you're easily triggered, perhaps consider skipping over this one. This is a true and real experience, which happened while I was delivering newspapers one winter's morning. It was around 4 in the morning, and it was freezing. I was out on my usual paper route, delivering newspapers. The whole neighborhood was still shrouded in complete darkness. The bitter winter winds were blowing strong. I was approaching an apartment block with my papers, and I was heading into a dark corner of the building when I heard a voice. It sounded like people were talking. What the hell were people doing up at this hour, let alone outside chatting in the cold, I wondered, as I squinted my eyes to get a better look. As I drew closer, I saw that there was a woman doubled over and crouching in the corridor before me. I instantly knew something was wrong. As I got closer, I noticed that all that woman was wearing was her underwear. Why? Why was she out here, in the freezing midwinter morning, alone with no clothes on? She was shivering. I went over to her, and I asked her what had happened, if she was okay, and if she needed any help, but she wouldn't reply to me. I couldn't stand to see her like that. Before long, she would freeze. Her lips were already beginning to turn blue. I took my coat off and tried to put it around the woman. She pleaded with me not to give her the coat, and she tried to push it off of her. She muttered something about if her husband saw her with the coat, she would be in trouble. In that moment, I knew I had to do something. I suspected domestic violence. I called the police. I waited with the woman for the cops to arrive, just outside of her door. She wouldn't say a word. I didn't know how long she had been out there, but it was truly a sad and haunting sight to see a woman alone in her underwear on a dark, cold morning. While we were waiting for the police, her front door burst open. Her husband came rushing out. He started shouting at her. She cowered as he threw a punch at her. I obviously intervened. Back then I was about 20. I was pretty quick and into my martial arts, and thankfully I was strong enough to protect the woman until the police arrived. The woman broke down and told the police that this wasn't the first time he had forced her out into the cold in just her underwear. So it seemed like this kind of thing happened all the time, which made me sick to my stomach. I have always tried to see the best in people, but this incident has rocked my confidence in human beings being decent. I mean, to throw your half-naked wife out into the cold. Man, humans are terrifying. In Japan, we have a kind of understanding between mountain climbers. When mountain climbing, if you happen to meet another party of mountain climbers, you should greet each other. However, in a blizzard or a snowstorm, it's very rare that you would come across another party of climbers. But if you do, don't stop and chat. Just keep on moving and never look back. If you do stop, they'll think you need rescue and turn around. There's also another theory that you may encounter spirits in a snowstorm. Spirits of lost mountain climbers, and you wouldn't want them to follow you. I broke this golden rule, and my party were stuck in a life-threatening situation, high in the freezing cold mountains. On that day, we were going up the mountain in a line, and the snowstorm hit. We were relatively close to the summit, and thankfully, we managed to take refuge in a small cabin. On the way up, we saw another party heading down the mountain. When we passed one another, I called out to the other group. No one from the other group responded, possibly to show that they did not need any help. I looked at the other members of my group, shocked, and continued to head to the mountain lodge. I was an inexperienced mountain climber at the time, and I didn't know about this unspoken rule, so I called out, "Where are you going? The cabin's this way." The other party just continued down the mountain until they were out of sight. but I heard one voice call back, "We'll come back later." In this blizzard, there is no later, so I stood there surprised by the other party's response until I was urged to hurry up and get to the lodge. When we entered the lodge, there were sleeping bags. It was freezing. Everyone huddled side by side to wait out the snowstorm. We were pretty miserable and shivering when we heard the knocking on the door. The leader of my party stood by the door and shouted, "Come in!" Baffled why anyone would choose to wait outside in the blizzard. No one came in. The door wasn't locked or anything. Someone called out, "Maybe they're hurt and they can't open the door," as they approached the door to open it. He opened the door, and there was no one out there. Just the blizzard blew in. "Or maybe that was the sound of snow hitting the door, and it just sounded like knocking," someone said as the door was shut. I didn't really buy that. About 20 minutes went by. We all heard the sound of knocking on the door again. I opened the door to see if anyone was out there, but again, there was no one there. Bear in mind that every time the door is opened, the temperature in the cabin drastically drops. We knew we couldn't keep doing this all night, so we were left with a horrible moral dilemma. Leave someone out there to freeze, if they are indeed out there, or just ignore the knocking. The knocking continued. People were arguing whether to open the door or not. The interval between each knock shortened. 20 minutes, 10, 5. With some of the group up in arms and demanding that the door be opened, and others in the group demanding the door remain shut. Each group winning occasionally. The group reached crisis point, and our leader ordered that the door of the cabin was to remain shut. Still, the knocking persisted. We all remained silent and tried our best to ignore it. The knocking finally ceased. There were some murmurs of relief. While members of the group were considering if they had done the right thing or not, a banging sound began on one of the cabin walls. We shot each other nervous glances. Then, we all heard a voice. It was spine-chilling. It sounded like a human voice. "Hey! Hey!" It really sounded like someone was out there. Not only were the walls being banged on, but the ceiling and the floor was shaking with the impact. It continued. That eerie voice just kept calling, "Hey! Hey!" It went on all night. We hunkered down in the middle of the room and took turns taking guard. The snowstorm subsided in the morning. We were supposed to climb to the summit, but no one wanted to go anymore. Could it have been the voice of a lost spirit in the snow? Or some kind of cryptid? Does anyone know what that was? I often think about it. This happened when a buddy and I were on our way to a ski resort. I was driving and my friend was co-pilot. He sat with a road atlas across his knees. This happened before sat-navs and smartphones. I remember every 5 minutes my friend was saying, "Oh, it's not much further now." I was in kind of a bad mood since the snow looked as if it was gonna stop. My friend had the smart idea that if the snow was easing up, we could take a shortcut through a kind of country lane. "This is a complete failure," I said to him. "Nah, man, we are so close. I got a good feeling about this shortcut. It's fine," he replied. I wondered if this trip was going to be worth it or not. I thought about turning back because if there was no fresh snow, skiing wouldn't be as fun. But I couldn't just pop a U-turn on the highway. So at least if I tried his mountain road, I may get a chance to turn the car around if I needed to. I got on the mountain road and made sure I went slow and steady. The trees were dense and in full growth. This road was dark and basically a mud track. Some light, upbeat music was playing on the radio. It was in complete contrast to the two of us. We weren't speaking. I wanted to get back on the main road, so I sped up a little. There was nothing but trees, no houses or anything. We were on this road for about an hour when we finally saw some signs which showed that the highway was coming up. It was at this point my friend said, "Hey look, there's someone there." I saw the figure of a man stood by the side of the road. I slowed down to see what was going on. The guy by the road started waving us over. He was smiling, and I guess he looked about 30 years old. I pulled the car over, and the man approached. He knocked on the passenger side window. I opened it a crack. "Ah, thank you for stopping. My car broke down. Do you think you could help me out?" he said. I didn't see a car, so I didn't say anything. My friend must have been thinking the same thing, because he didn't say a word either. Something was definitely off about this situation. The man tried to jam his fingers through the gap in the window. "Hey, open it." I hit the central locking just as he was trying the door. "Hey, come on, open it." His friendly rescue me persona melted away. He was angry and aggressively trying to get in my car. He kept rattling the door. "Open it." He pulled out a large hunting knife. "Get out of the car now." At that point, I hit the accelerator, and we peeled out of there, leaving that man running after us. Always keep your wits about you, and stay safe out there. I remember when I was a child, I loved nothing more than to go out in the crisp white snow and play. To make a footprint in the pure white snow, where no one else has. Bliss. This happened to my brother and I, when we were kids. I remember on that day it had been snowing non-stop since the morning. My little brother and I were itching to get outside and play in the snow, but Mum had said we couldn't go out there until the snow had stopped. We were pretty sick of playing indoors at this point. 5 p.m. rolled around and it began to get dark outside, but the snow finally had stopped. Even though it was winter and it was past 5, it wasn't too dark to see out. We pleaded with Mum to let us out. She finally agreed, as long as it was only for an hour. So we raced out to play in the snow. Even though it was very dim and gloomy out, thanks to the snow, it didn't seem that dark. We lived out in the countryside back then. Pretty much right in front of our house there was nothing but rice fields, which had now become pure white fields of snow. We were loving it, crunching the fresh snow underfoot. There were no other footprints in sight. It was our snow. Soon my brother and I made all the snow bumpy and it wasn't fresh and untouched any longer, so we went in search of pure white snow to play in. We walked further from our house. It was hard to see where the road began and the fields ended, but we found a field just ahead of a single streetlight, and it made the snow look like it was shimmering. Pure, untouched snow. We spoke about what we could do with the snow. We decided on using our footprints to make a giant smiling face. We planned how we would make the face, and then we got to work. We were totally immersed in our work because we didn't have much time to create our masterpiece. I think it took no longer than about 15 minutes to finish our artwork. We went back to where we thought the road was to see our art beneath the streetlight, and I was really happy with it. I looked over to my brother and I noticed that he was staring beyond the field. He looked really concerned. He began to breathe heavily. I looked in the direction that he was staring at, and I started breathing heavily myself. We shot each other glances to see if we were seeing the same thing. Beyond our snow art was a figure in the snow. A woman in a wedding dress, a white kimono bridal gown. We couldn't believe our eyes. We were sure we were the only ones in the field just now. I saw traces of my footprints and my brother's, but not that woman's. She made no imprint in the snow. She began to move towards us. My brother and I broke into a run. We aimed for the lights of our family home and ran as fast as we could. We were screaming and shouting for our mother. She threw the door open and came out with a concerned look on her face. We blurted out what had just happened. She listened to our story, but just laughed it off. She didn't even look outside. A few years later, when I was in high school, I asked my little brother about that one snowy night. I said, "She was creepy, that bride in the snow. I didn't like that I couldn't see her head because of the way she was kind of bent over." He said he remembered that night well. "Oh, the bride in the snow. You didn't see her head because she didn't have a head." He looked pale. It made me shiver. What happened to her? I am convinced that day we saw a ghost.